Happy Monday. Welcome on into Let's Bet It. Lauren Jabari here with Jared Smith. Jared, you are living the Vegas life. You've been there for about a week now. How you doing?
I'm feeling great. The early wake up. I don't
Good.
mind the early wake up calls. That was what everyone was asking me. Like, oh, you have to get up so early for work. I like it because I'm done by 8 and I'm at the pool by 8:15, which is great. But I honestly love this lifestyle. It's been obviously a stressful week moving, but a little less stressful now. I'm getting my second TV mounted today. The command center is getting built, but I feel great.
Coming
How
together.
do you feel this morning? Yeah. How do you
I'm
feel on this
good. It was a
Monday?
long weekend. I worked the Braves series. They went 4-0 against the Marlins, so that was good. Now they're gearing up for the series against the Mets. And guess who didn't get enough
Yeah.
baseball this weekend? So she's going to the Braves Mets game tonight. This girl right here got a little bit more baseball to be watching. I'm going as a fan, so that will be fun. Lots of bets going on this past weekend. We had preseason, a couple new things that we need to touch on to start the show. Zach Wilson officially got the word on him. At this point, is expected to miss 2 to 4 weeks with a bone bruise and meniscus tear, but we won't know officially how long he'll be out until his surgery. They said if it's only a trim, which I don't even know what that means, trimming down.
That sounds
meniscus.
weird, by the way.
And it kind of grosses me out.
That's like, what is he getting, a haircut? Like, what?
Yeah,
What?
just trimming it down. He'll only miss 2 to 4 weeks. If it's a full repair, he could miss basically a majority, if not the entire season this year.
I don't trust the Jets. Let's just leave it at this. If you don't
That's
trust
what I was
the
going to say.
Jets,
For
I
you
don't
as a
trust the
Jets fan, your thoughts.
I don't trust the Jets. Like, I was gonna tweet out a joke about, I don't know if you ever watched The Simpsons, but The Simpsons had a joke with like this doctor who was like a quack doctor, and he attached an arm to a leg and a leg to an arm. I was gonna tweet that out last night, but then I felt like it was maybe not in good taste because there was a medical procedure that had to be done, and I didn't want to. Yeah, too soon. But that's how I feel about the situation. I don't trust. If there is a range of options that the Jets doctors need to try to thread that needle, literally in this case with his ligament, I don't feel very confident about it. But who knows? Well, hopefully the doctors do their job.
Yeah, we're hoping it's just a trim, again, whatever that means, and not a full repair, but we will see after he gets his surgery, which I think is this week, right? So we'll see what ends up happening in the news that ends up coming out in the days to come. Okay, one other thing to touch on, preseason, overs, hitting at a wild rate, Jared. Tell us more.
So just the overs themselves, 14-3 in the preseason. Now, most of the totals have been in the 30s, all of them actually. And I would assume now that we're getting into week 2, where the starters should play longer than a series or not at all, you'll start to see totals in the higher 30s, lower 40s. And I'm assuming that's when the over train will get derailed. But now I wouldn't recommend teasing overs, first of all. Don't tease totals. We've talked about this. It makes no sense. But it is noteworthy that in every permutation, there's been 17 games, so you can do a 3-team teaser 560 different ways in those 17 games. If you teased any game 10 points to the over, you are undefeated. There is no permutation of 3-team 10-point teasers to the over that have not cashed yet through the first 17 games of the postseason. We haven't had that 9-6
26 and whatever.
560-0. It's ridiculous. It won't continue, but it's absurd to mention and just to put out there in the universe. I'm sure talking about it will get it to stop, though. That's usually how it works.
Yeah, usually you put it out there and it ends up jinxing the whole thing. So we'll see what ends up happening moving forward with some of these preseason games and which players are going to be playing, if the overs are going to keep hitting at a consistent rate. 14-3 again for the weekend. Moving forward, we have a lot to talk about today. Better Up segment. We're getting into our MLB bets. Is the trend your friend? And then we have AFC North season totals. You know, we've been going through all of these division totals, player props, and what our expectations are. We're actually having Mo Egger on. He's the host on ESPN Cincinnati, so he watches the Bengals up nice and closely every single day. He's going to give us his insight on what he thinks is going to be happening this season with the AFC North, because it is a very difficult division. But let's start it out with MLB. First of all, Jared, you know the game. Is the trend your friend? Let's start it out with the Guardians who are taking on the Tigers. The Guardians are 10-0 in their last 10 as favorites against the AL Central.
Well, there's 2 of these games today. That's interesting to note. So the first game is the afternoon, matinee of the day-night doubleheader. Hutchison Savali. I was looking at Savali for walk props. I didn't get to the window on him, but and the reason why is because his numbers are really good against the Tigers. So I don't know if I would bet the second game because it's a guy I've never heard of, Xavier Curry, who I think is making his major league debut. But the first game with Savali, yes, absolutely. And by the way, the Guardians, they were a long shot
They're top of the division
to win the division. Yeah, they were a long shot to win the division. They're 2.5 games up right now in the AL Central. They're looking like a playoff team. So
good for them.
I would bet the straight up. I'd bet the run line there with the Guardians. I would take that trend. Friend me, baby.
All right, next one. Twins Royals Nerfy. No runs first inning. The Twins 8-0 to the Nerfy in their last 8 games at home.
Twins 8-0 to the Nerfy in their last 8 games at home. Bubich, Joe Ryan today. Bubich's numbers have been kind of booby, for lack of a better word. I don't think I can get behind this Nerfy just because of what I'm seeing with Bubich. His whip is almost 2 in the first inning. His FIP is over 8. Joe Ryan's numbers have been good. So I expect Joe Ryan to get through the top of the first, but I don't know if I can bet it. It's minus money, too. The Nerfy in Minneapolis. So unfortunately, I think we're unfriending this trend.
Oh, no friend here. Okay, 2 more for you.
No
Dodgers
friend.
run line. Dodgers 8-0 on the run line in their last 8 against the National League. I think I used this trend before, and it's continued to go. So why not keep riding the train until it ends?
The Dodgers are on an insane run right now. I think they've won like 14
Crazy.
straight games. Listen, Dodgers Astros, you heard it here first. That's the World Series this year. Just mark it down on August 5th. We've been saying it for months, but I don't see any other way that we don't get a Dodgers Astros World Series. But that being said, Urias Peralta tonight. Peralta's numbers are pretty good against the Dodgers, but I don't trust him as far as I can throw him. He's been really wild since he's come back from injury. Yeah, I can't fade the Dodgers right now. You can't fade the Dodgers.
You can't fade the Dodgers ever.
Can't fade
so
the Dodgers.
Good.
The pitching matchup is meaningless.
Yeah. And one more, I know you mentioned this before the show started, and we're going to get into Yerfies and Nerfies, but Braves, Mets, no runs first inning. The Braves 6-0 to the Nerfy in their last 6 against the NL East. The Braves currently on a 6-game winning streak. This is going to be a pumped up series. I cannot even wait.
Let's just get into it right now. I'll give you the pick. I'm betting this Nerfy. I got it even odds at FanDuel. Listen, I don't know how the vibe will be in Atlanta tonight. There's no way that it doesn't have that playoff feel. Like, this is the last time these two teams are going to meet until the last weekend of the season. And the Braves are 5 games back. This series is huge for Atlanta.
I know.
And you've got Strider.
And the last time they met up too, Jared, I worked that series. And let me tell you, like, the energy just around the Battery and Truist was wild. And at that point, they cut it to,
that's what I want to hear.
Down, I think, only a half game. And then obviously the Mets ended up winning the final 2 and created a little bit more separation. But there was a point in mid-July that they were down to a half game behind the Mets for the NL East division. So they could make up some ground here if they get a couple wins.
Huge. I mean, honestly, I'm very excited. So we're at the point, and we'll get into it later with my play of the day. We're at the point now in the season with 6 weeks left where these games have a different feel to them than they did in June and July. Like, you get that playoff intensity that starts to seep in, and it makes the games a little more intriguing for me to bet the money lines and the run lines than it is the Nerfies and the props and all the other crap, the junk food that we've been basically consuming throughout the course of the Major League Baseball season. Now we're starting to get into the prime cuts. And this game tonight is the filet mignon, I think, on the board. But the Nerfy makes sense to me. 29-6, Carrasco and Strider combined to the Nerfy this year. Strider's 12-1. And with his stuff, and then the Mets have seen him a little bit, and that makes me a little bit more concerned. But with his stuff, he's like the perfect nerfy pitcher because he comes out throwing like
Yeah.
closer stuff, just trying to gas you. And the Mets scoring rate drops off dramatically on the road. They're a 46% rate at home, down to 23 on the road. So away from Citi Field, that magic that they have in the first inning just kind of dries up. The Braves have been about an average team home and road this year with their first inning scoring rate. So I think at even odds with the pitchers, especially Strider, we're getting a fair price here. So I think this is the only nerfy I'm betting today. And I think, again, at that price, I think we're really getting a solid wager here.
If you look yesterday, the Nerfies went about 50%, a little bit over Yerfies, Nerfies. NRFI 8-7 yesterday, but Spencer Strider coming out. He's going to be throwing fire. That guy is a strikeout machine. So if you ever want to look at his strikeout props too, that's always kind of a good prop to hit. Okay, getting into some more of our bets. I know you have a walk this way parlay. I'm going to start it out though. You know I love my strikeout props. So I'm hitting Joe Musgrove today. Over 5.5 strikeouts and only laying 32 cents for it. I know this number is a little tight, but he's gone over this in 2 of his last 3 starts. He has the Marlins tonight, which I watched extremely closely this weekend when the Braves were taking them on. This team has not scored over 3 runs in 15 straight games. That sucks. Their offense is horrible. I know they have a sneaky low K rate, but yesterday they did get punched out 10 times against Bryce Elder. Who? Exactly. Bryce Elder for the Atlanta Braves. And they struck out 12 times total. They're averaging 9 strikeouts in their last 3 games in general. They just do not have a good offense right now. I feel like they're kind of down in the dumps in terms of like emotional stability, especially on the offensive side, because if they could get their offense going, their defense is good enough to be, well, they made a couple errors yesterday, but their defense is good enough to be able to at least get them to a 500 record. But it's just their offense. They can't get hits. They haven't scored over 3 runs in 15 straight games. That sucks. So I like Joe Musgrove here. I know it's a little bit close, a little risky, but I'm only laying 32 cents for it. The number's low enough for me to feel confident that he could get up to 6 strikeouts, especially seeing how quickly and the rapid rate that they were striking out this past weekend against the Atlanta Braves. And the Braves weren't even throwing their best pitchers. They threw Jake Odorizzi, they threw Mueller, they threw Ian Anderson, who's getting sent down to the minors, and they threw Bryce Elder. So it wasn't even their normal rotation of, you know, like guys like Kyle Wright, Charlie Morton, Spencer Strider, and they still striked out.
My apologies. I couldn't hear what you said.
Am I not talking loud enough for you?
Siri loves your handicap.
Am I not talking loud enough for you right now? Apparently it's Monday and my energy isn't up right now, but it's okay. Siri wants me to talk louder. Joe Musgrove, over 5.5 strikeouts, laying 32 cents for it. Let's get into your walk this way parlay before we bring in Mo Egger to talk a little bit about the AFC North.
Do you want to know how big of a nerd that I am? So when you said Bryce Elder, there's two things came to mind. First of all, Lee Elder, who's the first African-American to ever play in the Masters, legendary golfer. Second, the Elder Wand from Harry Potter. Those are the 2 things that popped into my head.
Okay, I don't even know what that is, to be honest with you. Lock it up, Jared. Lock it up, okay?
The Elder Wand, people. Get on board with the Potter knowledge. All right, here we go. Walk this way parlay. We've got, listen, bear with me. We've had an unbelievable season with these. Don't make me tell you my record with walk props because I will. Okay, I'm going to anyways. It's 102-48 with the walk props we've had in this parlay this year. That's 68%. That's insane. But we are... I know it's ridiculous. I don't know how I can keep this up, but we're going to try. I have 2 unders on the board today, though, which is scary. But listen, the numbers say what they say. So Kyle Bradish, under 1.5, plus 125 at the Blue Jays. Bradish, 46% hit rate to the under. That's the equivalent of a plus 117 odds. So there's a little gap there. And 13 of the last 25 right-handed starters have stayed under 1.5 against the Blue Jays. That's over 52%, minus 108 odds. And he just faced Toronto at home, and he walked 2, which is not great. That would be a loss for this, but he was at Toronto a few weeks ago, and he walked 1. So I think we're kind of right in between. I think this bet's 50-50 coin flip, and we're getting plus 125 odds, which is a favorable number. Josiah Gray, this is the over 1.5 on Josiah Gray. 76% hit rate on 1.5. Remember last time we went under 2.5. He stayed under. Now we got that number to move back down to 1.5, which is where I feel comfortable playing Gray. Now we're going back over. 5 of the last 7 right-handed starters over 1.5 against the Cubs. They're about an average walk rate team this year. here's the rub with Gray. He just faced the Cubs in his last start, and he didn't walk anybody. But he hasn't had 2 consecutive starts without issuing a walk all year. So coming off of a start with no walks, I do not see that happening again in this start. So over 1.5 on Josiah Gray, laying 80 cents. And finally, another under, Jose Urquidy, under 1.5, minus 230 on this one. Yikes. 67% hit rate on the year. That's only about minus 200 odds. So we need to make up some ground with the lineup, but we are, because he's facing the White Sox, who have had 22 of the last 25 righties stay under 1.5. They have the lowest walk rate in baseball. They're under 5% in the last 30 days. This team just is not patient at the plate. Tony La Russa with his, going to sleep in the dugout. He must be out there swinging the bat too. And Urquidy, who's actually been better on the road this season, at Chicago tonight, under 1.5. So I'll give it to you one more time. Bradish, under 1.5. Gray, over 1.5. Urquidy, under 1.5, plus 407 on this parlay.
I like it. 4-1 odds for the Walk This Way parlay as we walk this way into the NFL. Honestly, the vocal cords are not feeling it this morning. It is a Monday, but we want to bring in Mo Egger, the host on ESPN Cincinnati and the Mo Egger podcast, to break down the AFC North division. It's an extremely challenging division this year. All 4 teams really do have merit to be able to win this thing and finish at the top. Mo, how are you? Happy Monday.
It's Happy Monday. What's going on?
Nothing.
He's got the energy today.
Out. We're getting ready.
Yeah.
Getting ready for the NFL season. I can't even wait. Obviously, you got to watch the incredible run that the Bengals had last year, living in Cincinnati. Have you always been a lifelong fan, too, of the Bengals? Are you from Cincy originally?
I am. And so, this was the team of my youth, right? The 88 team that went to the Super Bowl. I was in the 6th grade, and I thought, man, this is what it's going to be like. My team's awesome. I have a lifetime of the Bengals being relevant and playing for championships in front of me. That's what I comforted myself with when I was in the 6th grade and they lost to the 49ers, thinking, no big deal, they'll be back. Lo and behold, I was in my 40s before that happened again. I wish somebody.
I've never seen
that
side and said in the Super Bowl though, Mo. So at least I'm a Jets fan. So at least you've had 2 opportunities to watch your team play in the Super Bowl. I am jealous of that.
I'm pretty lucky by comparison, I guess, huh?
No, and I'm a Lions fan, unfortunately. I don't know what being a Jets fan or being a Lions fan.
These are the sort of friends that I need. I need you guys in my life because now I feel like I'm a lifelong Patriots fan or something.
I know, seriously, though. Okay, let's get right into the AFC North because we'll start with the Steelers, I guess the bottom of the barrel in the AFC North, but at the same time, all teams are looking pretty good. It's a new era. Sans Ben Roethlisberger for the first time in 18 years. The big storyline around this team right now is the quarterback battle. Mitch Trubisky, small hands Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph battling for the starting job. Who do you think gives the Steelers the best chance to win the most games this season? Their win total right now is set at 7.5, and I'm leaning the over here for this spot.
Yeah, I'm sort of doing the same thing. I mean, look, if you're talking about the guy who gives them the best chance to win games this season, it's the guy. I don't love citing a quarterback's win-loss record. It's a made-up stat, but Mitch Trubisky's teams are 25-13 in the last 38 games in which he has started. That doesn't include the games he played for Buffalo last season. And so, he has experience kind of not getting in the way of a team that's got a good defense. And this Pittsburgh team, they spent more money on defense than anybody in the NFL. By comparison, they've spent the least amount of money on offense than anybody in the NFL. And I think that's going to play itself out and make the Steelers really hard to score against. It's also going to mean that when they do win games, they're going to win them ugly. They're going to win them because the quarterback didn't get in the way. They're going to win them because they don't have to outscore people. And I think that lends itself to the guy that might not have the highest ceiling, but certainly at this stage in his career might have the highest floor. And at the outset of the year, that's going to be Trubisky. I lean over as well. Look, Mike Tomlin last year, that team, despite Ben Roethlisberger, won 9 games, and they had a tie, right? Yeah. So a defense that could be better. I like Najee Harris. I frankly think any of those guys is an upgrade from the version of Roethlisberger we saw last year. And if Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season, which he hasn't, I find it hard to believe that his first losing campaign will be a 7-10 record. And so I go over as well. But I do feel like Trubisky gives them the best chance of hitting that number.
Yeah, Jared, can I make one more comment about this before we move on to the Browns?
Yeah, go ahead. Nail it.
I look at last year, and their Achilles heel was kind of their O-line and Ben Roethlisberger behind it, but they signed guys like James Daniel. They signed center Mason Cole, who I love watching at Michigan, obviously. And also you look at their defense with TJ Watt, who won the Defensive Player of the Year last year. They have my attention right now. I mean, 5 wins in their schedule are basically baked in. They just need a trio of upsets elsewhere. And that's possible if their defense plays well. So I feel pretty good about the over in this spot too, Mo. Jared, sorry, you could go on with the Browns.
No, I'm curious what 5 games you have baked in as wins. Just give if
Yeah.
do you have their schedule up?
Yeah, I do. Of course, I
Tell me
read
what
my
5
notes
games
down,
they have baked.
Jared.
I'm curious.
I'm curious. Yeah, I think they might get off to a slow start, but still, you look at week 2 against the Pats, the Jets, sorry about that, week 4, the Browns in week 3 with no Watson. And then I look at the Saints in week 10, Falcons in week 13, Panthers in week 15.
Okay.
I can see that being 5-6 possible wins. So I don't know. I feel pretty good about it at this point.
It's clearly the quarterback, right, Mo? And that brings us to Cleveland, because that is listen, I think this division's the toughest to cap this year. You get not only a ton of upheaval with, teams like Pittsburgh that have had one guy play quarterback for the last 2 decades, and then you get the situation in Cleveland, which is almost impossible to handicap. We have no idea what Deshaun Watson's status is going to be. We know he struggled in the preseason. We know that Jacoby Brissett, I think, is serviceable, and we know they have the easiest schedule the first 4 weeks of the year. I'm seeing 8.5 on their win total. If Brissett plays well those first 4 weeks, and Watson comes back and lives up to his at least somewhat reputation on the field, not off the field, I think 8.5 is pretty low for the Browns. What do you think about the Cleveland this year?
Well, I think if you assume that Deshaun Watson plays the majority of their games, I think you feel pretty good about the over. You talk about their schedule at the outset of the season. It's forgiving. The problem is it's twofold. One, the obvious thing is I think you have to at least prepare for the possibility that Deshaun Watson doesn't play at all this season. The other thing is in that their middle 10 games, there's a lot of Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson and Tom Brady and Josh Allen and Justin Herbert. And so, I mean, even if you go into, and I hate boiling games down to the quarterback matchup, but is Deshaun Watson significantly better than any of those guys? No. He might be as good, and he might be on a given week capable of outplaying the guy that he's starting opposite of. And if you don't have Deshaun Watson, I mean, look, on one hand, you could say the Browns last season got below replacement level play at quarterback for most of the season, and they still found their way to 8 wins. The problem is Jacoby Brissett is a replacement level quarterback. And so can you survive a few games with him? Sure. That's what you're looking for from a backup quarterback. But there just aren't that many instances in which a team has a pretty lofty over-under and they play the entire season with a backup quarterback, a guy who's basically been an experienced backup quarterback, but still a guy who's basically been nothing more than a backup quarterback. And they exceed that win total, especially when the win total would be on the plus side of 500. They're going to run the ball effectively in Cleveland. But look, they're already dealing with a Nick Harris injury. Jakeem Grant, the return guy that they signed this offseason, he's already suffered an injury. And so some of that stuff is starting to snowball just a little bit. And even if Deshaun Watson figure out a way to have him play more than 11 games, 6 games is still a sizable chunk. They're certainly not going to win all of those. And I think just based on the way this case is unfolding, the assumption now is going to be that even if Deshaun doesn't miss all 17 games, he's going to miss more than just 6. And if that's the case, and it appears that it is, I don't know right now how you feel good about them going above 500, as deep as that roster might be, as much as people might like Kevin Stefanski, and for all the promise that they still showed last year in spite of the quarterback situation, it's still replacement level QB play in a very difficult division.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens moving forward with Deshaun Watson, if he's going to be suspended all season, if it's just going to be 6 games. Obviously, we'll have more news on that moving forward over the next couple of weeks, and we'll keep you posted on that. Let's head to the East Coast with the Ravens. I know that's a team that people are high on for getting over 500 this year. Last year, they started 8-3. They lost their last 6, but 5 of those 6 games, they only lost by 3 points, and they were one of the most injury-plagued teams last season. Lamar Jackson only playing 12 games. Now they're coming into this year. They're healthier. How big of a threat do you think this team is? Because at this point, it's between the Bengals and the Ravens for me to finish top of the division.
Yeah, it feels like a 2-team race right now, and that might not be the case if Deshaun Watson was going to play the full season in Cleveland, but it feels like a 2-team race. And look, there's 2 things about them. Number one, a ton of injuries, and they had a great offseason because they're healthier. By the way, if you're talking futures, I love J.K. Dobbins to win the Comeback Player of the Year at plus 1,600.
Ooh.
And they were also sitting there at 8-3 in spite of all the injuries before Lamar Jackson got hurt. And so then things unfolded the way they did. COVID just wreaked havoc with that team on top of all the other injuries. We saw what the Bengals did to them late in the season last year. They're obviously a threat. And, I don't think if you're going to tell me the Ravens are going to win the division, that's not an out there take. They bring back a former MVP who got hurt last season. They had a great offseason. I love Tyler Linderbaum. I like Kyle Hamilton a lot. John Harbaugh's a Hall of Fame coach. I guess the two questions that I would have would be, number one, who's Lamar going to be throwing to? Hollywood Brown is no longer there. I think they have 4 wide receivers on the current roster that have caught a pass. None of them you view as major threats downfield. And did they do enough to address their pass rush? They only had 34 sacks last season. I think 7 or 8 teams had fewer than 34. The kid they drafted from Michigan is going to be able to help, but not immediately because he's got an Achilles injury. And so did they do enough to address their pass rush? And are they going to be explosive enough downfield in a league that is kind of defined by that? It's interesting. You've seen how the rest of the NFL, including teams in their division, have really emphasized wide receiver. The Ravens, for a QB that at times has had issues throwing downfield, and I love Lamar Jackson, they've sort of de-emphasized that position. That's going to be interesting. But yeah, are they a threat? Sure. Will I go over 9.5? Yes. But I do have those two significant questions, and I think most people do about Baltimore.
Yeah.
That's fair.
I want to know about J.K.
Bateman,
Dobbins really quick. What do
Duvernay,
you like about him winning the Comeback Player of the Year?
Well, getting hurt last year during camp, I think they're going to have a better offensive line for him to run behind. And look, it's Comeback Player of the Year, and so the standard isn't an MVP caliber season. It's basically a guy who has a really good year, ideally for a very good team, who gets through a full season. And the number there is plus 1,600. I just like that value just a little bit too much. And so a whole lot of dudes on it that you could look at. But with that value, with that player, with that team, J.K. Dobbins, Comeback Player of the Year, I think is juicy at plus 1,600.
Yeah, that's an interesting award. I remember I think I had Roethlisberger last year. I forget who I had in that. I did have someone in that market last year, and it was obviously ended up being Joe Burrow, who certainly was deserving of it. It's been a quarterback 4 years in a row, Mo. I will tell you that. So, the quarterbacks on the list this year, Winston, Mayfield, Daniel Jones, Mitchell Trubisky, Marcus Mariota. I mean, I don't see any of those. I mean, maybe you can make a case for Baker if he wins the job in Carolina. I could see that happening. But, yeah, that's an interesting one. I have not looked at that award yet much, but I will put Dobbins at the top of the list. All right, time for the main event. You're a Cincinnati guy. You want to talk Bengals. The win total obviously is high. The division odds are relatively fair, I think. I think they're the second favorite behind Baltimore, even though they have a higher win total, which is intriguing. What is your vibe on Cincinnati coming into the season? Are we going to see regression? Is Joe Burrow going to stay upright with the offensive line? What are the pros? What are the cons to betting a season-long future on the Bengals?
Well, I think the con is it's hard to win 11 games, right? And so if you're going to exceed 10, it's hard to win 11 games even if we've tacked on another game to the season. So that's hard to do. I think you really, really have to think long and hard about how much you like a team. It's what you like about it, what you don't like about it, its schedule, the competitiveness of the division, the competitiveness of everybody else on their schedule. It's hard to get to 11 wins. And so I've sort of maintained with this all along that I'm just going to wait and see if I can shop around and find it maybe at 9.5. I don't think that that's going to be the case. When you look at the team, look, a year ago at this time, I could say, what is there not to like? And the answer was obvious, the offensive line. And you watched them in the Super Bowl. The offensive line was a disaster, but they addressed it very aggressively. They spent a lot of money, and they didn't go and get guys who they pulled off the scrap heap or dudes who used to be good but are coming off an injury. They grabbed 3 players, each in their prime, 2 of whom have rings, that have remade this O-line. And so now you look at the roster and you go, okay, what is there not to like? I don't really know that there's an answer. You might wonder, okay, how good can that offensive line be? That's fair, but there's certainly the expectation is they're going to be better than last year's line, which was awful from week 1 all the way until the very end of the season. And so, okay, You start with that. Then you look at the offense. You have an ascending quarterback who last year in his first full season led the league in touchdown passes. In completion percentage and yards per attempt. Very rare combination. He had 34 TD passes. And the key thing in the second half of the season, he stopped turning the football over. So they're going to protect him better. He's growing into the role. He's coming off his first normal offseason of his career. So, okay, the quarterback is ascending. The running game should be better. Look, Joe Mixon last year, you talk about prop bets. I think Joe Mixon's a pretty fun bet to lead the NFL in rushing yards. Last year, averaged only 4.1 yards per carry. 3.1 of those yards per carry came after contact. He's not going to be hit as much, and I do think they're going to run the ball more often. So what is there not to like? The defense is not going to be great, but they really didn't lose anybody off that unit. Special teams, they might have the best kicker in the game who's not named Justin Tucker and Evan McPherson. They have continuity with the coaching staff. So, what is there not to like? Now, you might say, well, number one, last year they were healthy. This year, there's no way they're as healthy. Okay, fine. But can you tell me where they're going to get hurt? Nobody can. The other thing is people focus on, well, they're a candidate for regression because they got lucky in the postseason. And certainly things fell their way, right? They won 3 playoff games on the strength of defense and special teams and by basically not turning the football over. And yeah, it helped that they were healthier than Tennessee. It helped that they were healthier than Kansas City. It helped that those two teams were complicit in their own demise. But in the regular season last year, they really weren't that lucky. They had a losing record in games decided by a score. So I find it hard to buy into the argument that they're not going to be as lucky because we're talking about a regular season number. So I'm going over 10. I don't love it because I don't love betting double-digit over-under totals and hitting the over, but I like their team too much. I think there's too many questions about Baltimore or about Cleveland. Pittsburgh, I don't think can outscore them. Cincinnati just ran roughshod over them in both the games they played last year. I like Cincinnati. I like the Bengals, and I think they're going to win the division. I think they're going to win 12 games. And if I'm wrong, you can have me back and laugh at me.
Yeah, I honestly do like the Bengals to win the AFC North at plus 180 right now. The one thing I look at with their win total is they do have one of the most difficult schedules in the NFL. Looking at opponents' win totals from last year, it's the 3rd hardest schedule in the NFL. But like you were saying, I do think that they don't have very many question marks. They do have the talent, and they are getting that experience year after year. They are one of the youngest rosters in the league. Quote me if I'm wrong on this. I think they only have 3 players that are over 30 years old. But the experience that these guys are getting, they're so good, these young players.
Yeah, look, it's a league that is driven by excellence at the skill spots, and the Bengals have that. They have as good a trio of wide receivers as you'll find in the league. Again, an ascending quarterback that they should do a better job of keeping upright. No real major glaring holes on the defense. I don't know that there's anywhere where you're terrified by a certain position group if you're game planning against them. I do wonder about their depth at wide receiver beyond the top 3. I think it's fair to wonder about their depth on the defensive line, specifically at the 3 technique. There's obviously the Jesse Bates situation at safety that I don't think is going to linger into the regular season, but it's certainly been a topic of conversation as training camp has unfolded. And again, do they suffer a rash of injuries that didn't really affect them last year? If the answer is yes, then this conversation changes. But if I'm looking at the roster, I just don't see many holes. And again, it's an ascending quarterback who had an MVP caliber season last year. The numbers did stack up against Rodgers and Brady, and they should do a better job of keeping him upright. They should have a better running game for him. And the other thing about this team is I still feel like their head coach, Zach Taylor, is growing into the role to the point that I think they're going to be better situationally, which was a knock against him and this team last year. I think that smooths itself out. You talk about their schedule. Look, they went to Kansas City and won. Kansas City came here week 17. The Bengals beat them, both of those games. They haven't gone to Buffalo yet, but they went to Baltimore before injuries really wreaked havoc and beat the Ravens. They swept Pittsburgh last year. I don't know that there's an environment that Joe Burrow is going to be intimidated by. And the key thing, maybe more than anything, at the midway point of the season last year, he led the league in picks, and then in spite of that offensive line, completely stopped turning the football over. That's why this team won the AFC North. That's why this team went to the Super Bowl, and it's why you have to consider them contenders to do the same this year.
I love it, Mo.
I see so much. FanDuel has a 9.5 right now on the Bengals win total. I would bet, and here's another thing too. We always talk about this, Mo. I'm sure you've heard this before. The 3rd year is when the quarterback makes his jump. I mean, this is Joe's third year, and this is Zach's third. It's Zach's third year, right? He came in conjunction with Joe.
It's his fourth year, but it's their third year together.
Okay.
And again, you have to consider, and I don't think Zach Taylor gets the credit he's due for this. Year one for Joe.
That first year was really
right?
bad.
Yeah, well, so year one, no preseason. He's learning the offense from his parents' living room in Athens, Ohio. He started week one and brought his team back from down 3 points in the final 2 minutes. If not for their kicker, Randy Bullock, busting his calf on the game-tying kick. That game goes to overtime, and who knows if they win or not. But still, they had him ready to go week one. Weird offseason. Obviously, Joe got hurt week 10 last year. The offseason was spent recovering from surgery, rehabbing from surgery. So an offseason interrupted. This has been his first normal-ish offseason. I say normal-ish because the offseason started late because they went to the Super Bowl. And so you have a coach-quarterback combination coming off its first normal offseason. They really only lost one main guy from their roster in CJ Uzama, and I think they did a good job in replacing him with a guy who's probably a more athletic pass catcher in Hayden Hurst. I don't know what there is to not like if you just look at the team on paper. Obviously, once the season starts to unfold and the realities of the schedule present themselves and injuries and stuff like that, that could change things a little bit. But if I'm looking at a team that went to the Super Bowl and addressed its one major deficiency, I don't know how you don't include them in that mix of, loaded AFC teams that we spent the offseason talking about.
I totally agree with you on that, Mo. We so appreciate your time. Mo Egger, host on
Mo.
ESPN Cincinnati and the Mo Egger podcast. Thank you for giving us your AFC North insight.
Anytime, guys. Thank you.
Best of luck to your team this season. That was Mo Egger. Love having him on. All right, let's get into our Pickswise 3-star play of the day, Jared. What do we got on the website before we get into our best bets?
Couple run lines today. Couple run lines. Mark Lammy's going twofer. Phillies, Reds, Dodgers, Brewers. Enjoy. God bless.
I love it. Check it out. Pickswise.com. All right, our best bets of the day. Do you want me to go first with my strikeout prop so then you can end it strong? Because we're kind of betting the same
whatever
game.
Makes you happy, my dear. Please do it. Make the people happy. Give them your strikeout prop, and I'll hammer us home with my run line.
Yeah, we're betting the same game just in different ways at this point. I like Luis Castillo over 6.5 strikeouts, laying 40 cents for it on FanDuel. DraftKings, it's a little juicier. I think it was up to -155. But Luis Castillo's been really good as of late. He struck out at least 7 guys in his last 5 straight starts, and he's going up today against the Angels, who over the last 2, we've been talking about the Angels all season. They've been really bad when it comes to striking out, but over the last 2 weeks, they have a 25.4% strikeout rate against righties. That's ranked 4th worst in the league. And this year, they're averaging 9.57 strikeouts per game, which is the absolute worst in the league. They only have a WRC plus of 86, so pitchers are going deeper into their games, and a 6.9% walk rate. The fact that Luis Castillo has hit this number in each of his last 5 starts, struck out 7 or more, I feel pretty good about this against a team that has not been very good in terms of hitting the ball this season. They've been whiffing at an extremely high rate, also with their low WRC plus. Castillo can get a little bit deeper into the game, and I feel pretty good laying 40 cents for it. I know it's a little juicy, but the juice for me, Jared, is worth the squeeze. You're betting this game too, but in a different way.
Yeah, listen, I think we need to start looking at money lines and run lines a lot more seriously. There's definable trends now with these teams, and some teams have a lot to play for and others have nothing to play for. And that is exactly what we have tonight with the Mariners and the Angels. I can totally get behind the Castillo strikeout prop. I think these are very correlated bets, but I'm taking the +1.5 on the Mariners run line at -190. I got this over at Caesar. So Castillo, as Lauren said, third start, first 2 were against the Yanks. That's tough. First 2 starts with a brand new team, and you get the Yankees in back-to-back starts, who are arguably the best lineup in the American League, maybe behind the Astros or tied right with the Astros. So I think that's a really tough ask for a pitcher switching leagues. And he did well, coming off 8 scoreless with 3 hits and 7 strikeouts against the Yankees. Now, the first start, he was a little bit more shaky. His last start, which was his second start, a little more comfortable with Seattle, very well. Now he gets to face an Angels team who has the lowest WRC plus since July 1st. Arguably the worst lineup in baseball. in the second half of the season. And the one thing I love about this Mariners lineup, so it's Shohei Ohtani on the other side, which obviously is a tough pitching matchup because Ohtani's had great numbers this year and he's a tremendous pitcher. But when you get past Ohtani, the Angels bullpen takes a big step back, and the Mariners bullpen has the second lowest ERA since July 1st at 2.5.
Yeah.
So I love this Mariners team. They've got the moxie. They've got this playoff push, this playoff mentality, and they're an underdog tonight. Totally fine with sprinkling the money line too. I put a half unit over at Circa plus 111, but I really think this is a great plus 1.5 bet on the run line this season. The Angels, not great as a favorite, 29-35, down almost 9 units. Mariners as an underdog on the run line this season, 36-26, up almost 7 units. So again, we have definable trends for these run lines and the money lines, especially when a team is favored or if they're the underdog. And I just think the motivation, the pitching matchup maybe is neutral, but the bullpen definitely favors Seattle, and the lineup absolutely favors Seattle because the Angels maybe have the worst lineup in baseball in the second half of the season. So I'll lay it. Big price here, minus 190, but I'll lay it. Plus 1.5 Mariners run line tonight at the Halos.
I love it, Jared. Absolutely love it. That is it for us today. We're both on the same game for our plays today. Find us on the Pickswise YouTube channel. Go to Pickswise.com. Follow us on Twitter. For Jared Smith, I'm Lauren Jabara. Best of luck tonight, guys. We'll see you tomorrow. Let's get it. Let's bet it.